Honey, I am so sorry. Pete said the fantasy draft would be over by 5. I didn't know.
Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Oh, see, okay, I know that means it's not fine. All right, listen, if I knew it was going to be this late, I would have driven myself.
Just drop it. It's forgotten.
Look, if you're mad, it's okay. I get it.
Mad? What I need to be mad about?
You had to put the kids to bed by yourself. Ugh. We were supposed to watch Downtown Abbey. I was looking forward to
Downton Abbey.
You're so smart. That's why I love you.
What's today?
Sunday.
The 8th?
Yeah.
Don't worry about it, honey. We all make mistakes. Don't beat yourself up about it. It's fine. It's forgotten. I'm sure this is the last time you'll ever do anything like this again. Trust me.
Thanks. I really appreciate you understanding.
It's not a problem.
I'll make it up to you next season. Can I go?
From the outside looking in, you would think that everything in my marriage was really pretty good. In fact, our whole family looked pretty good. We had been married for 8 years. We had 2 children. We had 1 more on the way. We had a house that was great. We had cars that were great. I mean, I had a job that was great. In fact, I was able to work from home, and everything was about as good as it could get. So it looked. On the inside, though, our marriage was beginning to crumble. And it wasn't because of any specific thing that was happening. It wasn't even an event that caused it. It just was a drift over time. And it was that feeling that really drove me to a counselor for the very first time. I'll never forget that first day I walked into the counselor, and I had an expectation that I was gonna walk him through what was happening in my marriage, and he was gonna be so sympathetic with my story that he would ask to bring my wife in next week so he could work on her, because I thought she really was the problem. I began to walk him through some of the things that were happening kind of in our relationship, the ways I was feeling kind of undervalued or underappreciated. I did everything I could for our family. I worked really hard. I was a good father as best as I could be, at least. I tried to be a great husband. I would do the dishes every night that she cooked. I mean, I really tried hard to be as great of a husband and father as I could. And I just felt so undervalued, and I just felt unappreciated. So I began to walk that counselor through that conversation. I said, let me give you a perfect example of what's happening in our house. A few weeks prior, my wife was out of town for a couple of nights, and I was keeping our children, 2 of them at the time. And of course, I thought I was babysitting my kids. I learned later that if you're a dad, you can't use the word babysitting your own children. Okay, I learned that the hard way, so save yourself that problem. And 2.5 days had gone by. My wife comes back home, and I thought it had been a really successful experience at home. Our kids were alive, and beyond that, they had been fed. They were relatively clean. I had given them a bath. They were in their jammies, ready to go to bed. And I really thought as a husband, I had knocked it out of the park. I had just been wonderful as a dad, and I was hoping that she would come home and recognize that. But you know what happened? When she came home, she walked through the door, she put her luggage down, and she looked at the house and noticed the kitchen counters, and there was a little bit of a mess on the counter. And for her, that was a big deal. She liked having a clean counter, and she said, "Oh, Gavin, I wish you would have wiped the counters." And I lost it. And I began to tell this counselor that whole story. And at the end of the story, he looks at me and he says, "Well, what do you mean you lost it? Why did that make you so upset?" And I remember pausing and I said, "Did you hear the story? Did you hear any of this? For 2.5 days, I kept our kids all by myself. There was vomiting, there was diapers to be changed. I mean, it wasn't a great experience for me. But for 2.5 days, I held the whole thing together. And she came home and her first words were, 'Why didn't you clean the counters?' Why wouldn't I be upset? I mean, who in their right mind wouldn't be upset by that?" And the counselor said, "No, wait, but why did it make you upset?" And he grabbed a Bible and he opened it up. And I remember thinking, there's a verse in the Bible about wiping the counters. I've never heard that before. And he says, no. Let me show you this verse. He reads me one verse. And I'll remember listening to him thinking, there's something in this for me, but I'm just not sure what it is. We talked for about 30 or 45 more minutes. I got in the car. I drove home in complete silence the whole way thinking about this one verse. And for the next few weeks, I just processed everything I had heard through that conversation. The verse he showed me was from the book of John, John 13:34. John was one of the disciples of Jesus, and he's actually recounting and capturing, as the author of this book, an experience that he had with Jesus. It was in the upper room the night before Jesus was to be crucified. And some of you remember the Last Supper. And so John is up there having this festival, this Last Supper with Jesus. Jesus had done some really cool things already. He had washed the disciples' feet, and he's beginning to explain some things to them that they needed to understand, but it was things that were very different from the way they had been living and very different from probably what they had been experiencing in the world around them. So here's what Jesus tells those disciples. A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. That's the verse that the counselor showed to me. And when I began to think about that verse, I realized, man, I don't know that I've ever really understood that. I definitely know that I haven't done it. In my life, it was almost like I had rewritten that verse. Love one another the way that you want to be loved, or love one another when they deserve to be loved, or in my case, love one another so that they will let you play golf later this week. Maybe the best way to summarize it is to love one another so that they will love you in return. That's really the way I had been living in our relationship from the time we began dating all the way through that 8 years of marriage. Love her so that she will love me. But that's not what Jesus said. Jesus said, a new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. So you should love one another. And you know what? Through 6 years of dating and 8 years of marriage, I don't think I had ever loved my wife the way that Jesus had loved me. You see, when you think about the way that Jesus loves us, it's not a love with conditions. Jesus loves us without any conditions. Jesus loves us in spite of our ability to love him back. In fact, Jesus loves us even when we choose not to love him back. Jesus' love for us was never earned. It never was deserved, but every bit of my love in our relationship was really built out of expectations. In fact, I don't know that I had ever loved without an expectation of reciprocation. And that's really what separates God's love for us versus every other kind of love that we see in the world, and really all the love that we typically give to other people. It's the removal of all of those conditions. For me in counseling, I learned that if our marriage was ever going to thrive, if our marriage was ever going to be anything close to what I think God's hope was, I was going to have to change some things in my life and change some things in my heart. I was going to have to learn to love without any expectation of reciprocation. Of course, after 6 years of dating and 8 years of marriage, that was a big change for me in my life. So after weeks of processing and really trying to figure out what this verse, this new idea would mean in my heart and in our life and in our marriage, I decided to do something that I'd been doing for years and years and years, but I decided to do it for the very first time in a completely different way. I decided to do the dishes. It was the very first time I'd ever cleaned up after dinner without any expectation of a thank you, without any expectation of being told how great I was, or without any expectation of being able to play golf the next day without her complaining about it. It was the very first time I decided to actually love my wife the way that Jesus had chose to love me. Now, that took a long time to figure out, and it took a lot of time to process. Maybe the best part about it, though, is I never even had to drag my wife to counseling, because she wasn't the problem. The problem was actually me. The problem, what was happening in my heart, that's what had to be fixed. In fact, what I realized is that if I was gonna fix my marriage, I had to fix my heart. And I had to fix the way that I was choosing to love my spouse. So if I could kind of push for a minute on you, one thing I know about all of us is that we live in a world that is full of conditions, and our natural instinct is to love other people with an expectation of reciprocation. But in your life, in your relationship, or maybe even in your marriage, what conditions do you need to remove? That may look different for each of us. But what conditions do you need to remove? Do you need to forgive the way that Jesus has forgiven you? Do you need to serve the way I did, the way that Jesus has served you? Or maybe it's a little bit bigger. Maybe you just need to love the way that Jesus actually is loving you. In a Christian marriage, that's exactly why we call it a covenant and not a contract, because it reflects God's covenant with us, the covenant that He loves us even when we're unlovable, the covenant that He loves us even though we don't deserve to be loved. That's what our marriage is supposed to look like. Unfortunately, too many of us treat it like a contract. And a contract has expectations. In fact, a contract is built on expectations. If both parties hold up their end of the deal, the contract stays in place. But that's not what a marriage is supposed to be. And that's why we call it a covenant. So what would it look like in your life, in your covenant of marriage, to remove those expectations? What would it look like for you to live and to love the person on the other side of you without an expectation of reciprocation? See, here's what I think. I think it would absolutely change everything in your relationship. And I don't just think that. In fact, I know that. Because after 20 years of marriage, I couldn't ask for a better relationship. And I think the reason is because I figured out in my heart that I had to change the way that I was loving my spouse.